The Spurs Women have just appointed a new head coach. Martin Ho has just signed a 3-year deal at the club. The club have also confirmed the signing of 19-year-old attacking midfielder Max McFadden, who was released by Leeds United. The Guardian have just reported that West Ham are not impressed with Spurs offering just £50 million plus £5 million in add-ons for Mohammed Kudus, and Spurs want to pay for the player over 5 years. TalkSport have just stated there is interest in Genoa centre-back Koni De Winter. The Sun newspaper have just stated that Thomas Frank will have to sit down with Heung-Min Son and have face-to-face talks about his future. Reports in South Korea are stating that Son has already made his mind up and he wants to stay at Spurs for one more season, giving the Champions League another shot. And Sky Sports have just stated that Thomas Frank wants to assess Richarlison in pre-season. Hi everyone, hope you're well. Chris Cowlin here. This is another edition of Tottenham News, where I'll be going for all of the latest Spurs news, rumours and reports. If you're watching on YouTube, please do hit that subscribe button, like, share and comment below. And if you're listening to this on an audio platform, please do hit that follow button and leave a review if you can. And please do vote for us at the Football Content Awards 2025. All of the details are below and all of your support is really appreciated. Thank you. Now let's start with some official news, and it is about the Tottenham Hotspur Women. Martin Ho has joined the club as the new women's head coach, replacing Robert Villaham, who spent the last 2 seasons at Spurs. In the club statement, it said, "We are delighted to announce the appointment of Martin Ho as our new women's head coach on a contract that will run until 2028. Later on in the statement, it says, "We are excited for Martin to lead the team as we prepare for our 7th season in the Barclays Women's Super League. Further updates on Martin's coaching staff will follow in due course." On Friday, it was announced by Tottenham Hotspur Football Club that the club have just signed Max McFadden following his departure from Leeds United. In the club statement, it said the 19-year-old attacking midfielder has signed a contract with the club until 2027, and he would join our under-21 squad ahead of the 25-26 season. Max has spent the last 3 years in the academy at Elland Road, stepping up to the under-21s in the summer of 2024 and playing against us in Premier League 2 last season. Prior to joining Leeds, Max spent time in the youth ranks at Colchester United, West Ham United and Southend. Now, the Guardian newspaper have just stated that West Ham are unimpressed with Tottenham Hotspur's initial proposal for Mohammed Kudus and do not intend to sell the winger for a bargain price. It is understood that Spurs suggested £50 million plus £5 million in add-ons to be paid over 5 years in early talks. Mohammed Kudus has a release clause of £85 million applicable to Premier League sides for the first 10 days of July. West Ham are willing to sell for less than the clause, but they have told Spurs that their proposal is not high enough, and sources believe that West Ham will do business at £60 million. The Guardian have also stated that West Ham have indicated that they do need to sell to buy. Sources are adamant that they have little room for manoeuvre because of the Premier League's profitability and sustainability rules. Mohammed Kudus is the club's most sellable asset and also has interest from Manchester United, Chelsea and Newcastle. Chelsea have suggested a swap deal to West Ham, who are interested in the Leicester goalkeeper Mads Hermansson. They want a left centre-back, at least 2 midfielders and a forward. It has just been reported by The Standard that Spurs defender Cristian Romero has just been banned from driving for 6 months after a string of traffic violations. Cristian Romero's ban started last week and is due to expire on Boxing Day, just before the club's Premier League clash with Crystal Palace. TalkSport have just stated that Tottenham are interested in signing Genoa defender Koni De Winter. Spurs are keeping tabs on the £21.5 million rated Belgium international as a possible replacement for Cristian Romero. Tottenham are keeping an eye on De Winter, and Inter Milan are also keen on doing a deal. Sky Sports have just reported about Richarlison, and they are stating he is among the players that Thomas Frank will assess in pre-season before a decision is made on his Tottenham Hotspur future. The Brazil forward has been the subject of wide speculation in successive transfer windows, in part down to injuries hampering his ability to play regularly. Richarlison's preference remains to stay and fight for his place at Spurs, as he is conscious he has not been able to show his best because of those periods on the sidelines. But Turkish club Galatasaray are thought to be among a number of teams who would be interested in signing him if there is any sign he could leave this summer. The Turkish club may be more interested in a loan, as would several other clubs, although that is far away from being a possibility at this stage. Sky Sports have also stated among Richarlison's priorities is to ensure that he is a regular for Brazil ahead of next year's World Cup, and for that he needs to be playing regularly at a high level. Richarlison still has 2 years left on his current deal at Spurs, who will play Champions League football next season and therefore need strength in depth. The club are looking to sign new forwards. Pedro Porro was seen at Hotspur Way on Friday training in the gym. Now, the majority of the Tottenham Hotspur squad will meet Thomas Frank on Saturday for the first time as they return to Tottenham's training ground for pre-season training. And Spurs' first pre-season friendly is now just 2 weeks away to be played on the 19th of July away at Reading, 3 p.m. kickoff. The Sun newspaper had just stated that Hamburg are lining up a move for defender Luka Vušković on loan. New boss Thomas Frank will want to look at him in pre-season, and he may consider keeping him if he does impress. The Sun have also gone on to state that the Bundesliga is a likely destination if he is allowed to leave on a loan deal. Now, South Korean journalist Han Jun has stated that Son has decided to stay one more season at Tottenham. He will meet Thomas Frank next week to finalise plans, and his goal is to have one last shot at Champions League glory at Spurs. The Sun newspaper have just stated a move for Heung-Min Son to America to LA Football Club is unlikely at this stage. He has a year remaining on his £200,000 a week contract, but a move to the US does not appeal to him right now. The forward is expected to return to training next week for medical checks. And the Sun have also stated that Heung-Min Son will then hold face-to-face talks with new boss Thomas Frank. Now, my thoughts on everything in this episode, and let's start by talking about Thomas Frank assessing his squad, because that is exactly what he will be doing from Saturday. He will be meeting a lot of the squad for the very, very first time. Most of the squad will be returning on Saturday. A few players will return, a couple of days later. They're always staggered, these dates. But the majority of the squad will return on Saturday, meeting Thomas Frank for the first time. And it's going to be very, very interesting the next couple of weeks. And of course, our first pre-season friendly is just 2 weeks away against Reading away on the 19th of July. I tell you what, this has come round very, very quick. And these games will then come round very quick, thick and fast. The under-21s, actually, have got their first pre-season friendly on Tuesday. These games have come around very, very quickly. And it will be interesting to see who Thomas Frank, takes on the tour to Asia, to Hong Kong and South Korea. Will a lot of the under-21 players be there? Will the likes of Jamie Donnelly, Josh Keeley, who of course spent time on loan last season at Leyton Orient? Very impressive loan spells, both of them. Manor Solomon, of course, comes back into the squad. There are a lot of players to think about, and Thomas Frank has clearly got to assess every single player, and they've got to impress. They've got to impress this manager. And this is without even talking about the transfer window and Spurs, not doing very much at the moment. I keep saying this, Spurs have a lot of catching up to do, but of course, Thomas Frank, this is very, very natural that a new manager comes in and they've got to assess their squad. Sky are stating that Thomas Frank wants to assess Richarlison. I'm sure that a lot of these outlets actually could have said that, Thomas Frank is going to be assessing every single player. He's going to be looking, every single player to see what they can offer and see what systems that some of these players can work in, etc. So it'd be interesting. Yes, I'm sitting here, a little frustrated that we haven't done much in this transfer window so far, in terms of experienced players, because, me as a Spurs fan, I want to be seeing experienced players coming in. We've heard Daniel Levy come out and say, publicly, that we want to be winning the Premier League and we want to win the Champions League. Of course, we've got to have that squad to be able to do that. I know there's a couple of months left of the transfer window, but when you see all of our rivals doing business, it is a little bit frustrating for all of us. The Son situation is very interesting because a South Korean journalist wrote on X that he believes that Son has made his mind up and he wants to spend another year at Spurs. None of the other journalists, certainly in England or around Europe, the very reliable journalists, none of them have commented about this story at all. I know a lot of the big accounts on X, fan accounts, etc. They've all covered this story, but there is nothing factual to back this up. There's no quote from Heung-Min Son. I think a lot of it is just guesswork at the moment. The Sun have come out and said that, Thomas Frank and Heung-Min Son have got to have face-to-face talks. That is exactly what I expect. I don't even think that Son's made it up his mind at the moment, if I'm completely honest. Does Heung-Min Son go out? Does he leave Spurs on a high, having just won the Europa League? Does he want a move somewhere else, to a different country? It would be a very, very interesting situation. Are Spurs lining up a replacement? So there's a lot to think about. But of course, Thomas Frank is going to be assessing this squad for a number of weeks. But I say a number of weeks, 2 weeks, down the line, we're playing Reading, and then these games come thick and fast, and then it's all down to the likes of Johan Langer, Vinay Venkatesham, etc., the Spurs ball, Daniel Levy, to get some of these deals done and get the players in that Thomas Frank will desperately need, because we did finish 17th in the Premier League table. I know we are a lot better than 17th. We do still need a lot of quality, installed into this squad, especially playing Champions League football. And those European nights do take it out of you a lot. And we need that depth. We need that depth throughout the whole of the squad. It's going to be an interesting situation to see what happens with Cristian Romero as well. These rumours keep being published. These reports keep being published. Spurs are apparently really going after centre-backs at the moment, and a lot of people are talking about, well, why would Spurs be eyeing up all of these centre-backs? Koni De Winter, we're hearing... lots of reports about us being linked to centre-backs during this window so far. And why would that be the case if Cristian Romero is staying? So it's going to be very interesting. Is Romero going to be staying a Spurs player next season? Is Son going to be staying a Spurs player next season? Then there are a lot of doubts, even the back end of last season, doubts about the futures of the likes of Basuma and Richarlison. Will they be Spurs players next season? All I know and all I think about is that Spurs do need a number of reinforcements in this squad to really improve not only the starting 11, but the depth as well, the bench. So there is a lot to do in this transfer window, in my opinion. Martin Ho has just become the new Spurs Women manager. Really looking forward to talking to him in press conferences and after games, etc. Really enjoyed covering the Spurs Women in the last couple of years. And Robert Villaham was, of course, at the helm. Really enjoyed talking to Robert on a number of occasions, and looking forward to talking to Martin, particularly about the club's ambitions, because the Spurs Women were miles apart from the top teams last season, and what's going to bridge that gap? How are the club going to bridge that gap? How are the club going to get nearer to those Champions League spots? Because Robert Villaham, when I spoke to him on a couple of occasions about this particular subject, He always said in his second season he wants to be going for that Champions League spot. And of course, Spurs Women finished second from bottom. It was a very similar league season to the men's, actually. So there is a big bridge to gap there. So it'd be interesting to see or hear from Martin. But Vinay Venkatesham did a couple of videos again. And it's funny because when I had Martin Lipton on, chief football writer for the Sun newspaper, on here a couple of weeks ago on the Spurs Chat podcast, he said that Vinay was not shy to a microphone. And we have seen, in the last couple of weeks, Vinay Venkatesham is not shy at all when a microphone is involved, and he will get, in front of a camera, and he's going to be talking to the fans. And I love this. The only thing that I would say about it is that it's all well and good when you've got a pre-season. It's all well and good when the results are there. I want to see also, and I want to hear also, when things aren't so good and when things are going wrong and when we are losing games. I still want that level of communication to be, put out there to the fans. But so far, Vinay Venkatesham coming in, that communication is 1,000 times better than what it was before at the football club. So I think that every single fan would welcome these regular updates and, explanations about decision making, etc., to the fans. I think it's great. So I really do hope that does continue. The club have just signed Max McFadden. He's just been released by Leeds United, 19-year-old. So it'd be interesting to see how he develops. Of course, we know that the football club is heavily driven on data. So every single signing, whether it will be, for the under-21s development team, first team, etc., it will all be driven on data. This Mohammed Kudus situation is a strange one. I've seen certain journalists say about the Tottenham tax, because it's Tottenham, it is a little bit more expensive. But the Guardian have actually stated that West Ham haven't got much room for manoeuvre at all. There is an £85 million release clause. They're willing to get a deal done for around 60 million, and it is frustrating a lot of the time. And I do get a lot of the fans' frustration because when Spurs seem to offer so close to what is the figure being demanded, a lot of the time the fans, even people like myself, say, well, why don't you just pay that few more million? If you really want the player and he is your top target, then surely they're worth it. But if Spurs are willing to pay £50 million plus the £5 million in add-ons, with £5 million away, so it's whether Spurs really do consider Mohammed Kudus as a top target, or for the sake of £5 million, we walk away and then we target somewhere else, or target someone else, should I say. But, as I keep saying, the season is just round the corner. A couple of weeks away from our first pre-season game, but there is a lot of assessing to do, as I've already mentioned, for Thomas Frank. He's got a huge job on his hands, Thomas Frank, and this is going to be a very, very different job to what it was at Brentford. So I do wish him all of the very best, but I hope that Spurs do get signings in very, very soon. Every single player, and I mentioned this on a previous episode as well, every single player that Spurs are being linked with at the moment, they do seem to be young players, up-and-coming players, rising stars, etc. But I really want to see experienced players coming in this window. I think it's an absolute must for Thomas Frank, to be climbing up a Premier League table, finishing 17th last year in the Premier League, to be climbing up that Premier League table and to finish the season well, and to do well in the Champions League, and to fight on the domestic cup front as well in the FA Cup and League Cup. We need a good squad. We need an experienced squad. And by the way, what an interesting move it is for Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker leaving Manchester City, and it looks like he is going to be completing a £5 million move to Burnley. What an interesting one that is. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're watching on YouTube, please do hit that subscribe button, like, share and comment below. And if you listen to this on an audio platform, please do hit the follow button and leave a review if you can. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and I will see you on the next one. Until then, come on you Spurs.
Podcast.